On today's World Insight, a ray of hope with potent vaccine candidates in the horizon. How viable are they? What's next? And a turnabout in U.S. policy under Biden, especially on pandemic and climate cooperation. How likely? Answers from two respected academics. Here is our host, Tian Wei.
Hello and welcome to World Insight. I'm Tian Wei in Beijing. We begin with glimmers of hope in the race for a safe and effective COVID-19 vaccine. The U.S. has reported more than 14 million coronavirus cases. Europe also buckles under the pressure of new infections. Many countries turned up restrictions. Hospitalizations are their highest there since the pandemic began. News that various COVID-19 vaccines appear viable is raising hope. As reported, vaccines could be rolled out as early as mid-December in the U.S., late this month in Europe. Given the tremendous speed of development, how safe indeed are vaccine candidates? Once approved, who gets what vaccine, when, where, and how? These are important questions for everyone. Let's loop in our panelists for some answers. For more discussion, we are joined in New York by Vincent Raccaniello, who is a Higgins Professor at Department of Microbiology and Immunology at Columbia University. In Washington, D.C., we have Dr. Yang Hongjun, Co-Director of Precision Medicine Professional Committee from Chinese Society of Biotechnology. Also in Washington, D.C., Dr. Shen Dong, Founder and CEO and Chairman of RNA Immune Incorporation. Welcome to all of you, gentlemen. There are so many different kinds of vaccines that have claimed themselves to be successful and effective. How much shall we trust in the press in terms of this reporting?
Always like to have the data published in a scientific journal to look at, but we don't have the luxury of doing that. We're in a hurry to get these vaccines out in about a year since we realized the urgency. And so what we have are a series of very different vaccines that are being pushed forward very quickly. You know, we've had a few reports here in the U.S. of 3 vaccines in phase 3 trial results. Looks pretty good so far, even without us being able to see the data. And so I have a lot of hope that they're working quite well and that we'll be able to deploy those within the next year. So far, we have phase 1 and phase 2 results. That is, phase 1 is a safety, phase 2 is safety and immunogenicity, how much of a good immune response the vaccine makes. And those have been published in journals, so we can look at the data, and the data are clear. The vaccines are safe, and they induce a good immune response. What we don't have the data for are the phase 3 trials, which are ongoing, and we only hear about those in press releases.
Dr. Yang, how do you see the latest results publicized by various companies?
And so far we saw that one is from the Pfizer and the biotech. They have basically they have the mRNA-based vaccine. Their response rate is reached 90% and up. Moderna is also very successful mRNA-based vaccine, which is even better. They can reach the 95%. AstraZeneca with collaborator with Oxford, and they also reached the 90% up that response rate. So all these 3 probably right now is top 3 in the world. On the other hand, we also heard from the China vaccine, they also get a very high response rate, about the 90%. So that's a very positive signal so far we received.
However, I got a quote from Chinese respiratory disease expert Dr. Zhong Nanshan, who is a big name in China, who talked about, quote, a safe and efficient vaccine takes at least 3 years, and the current 3-month trials adopted by Pfizer and Moderna are not enough. Dr. Shen, how would you respond to what Dr. Zhong just said? How would you understand that?
I totally agree with Dr. Zhong's comments, and yeah, for a vaccine, we do need to look at long term, not just a couple of months. But at the same time, we also need to realize we are in the pandemic. So that's why FDA, they issued the emergency use authorization guidance. The guidance is very clearly, and all the vendors, they need to provide the data, and both efficacy data and the safety data 2 months after the final dose.
Another thing is, what does it mean effective? And what does it mean efficacy, safety?
Vaccine efficacy is calculated during a clinical trial, a phase 3, the last part of the trial. And what you do is you immunize so many people with the vaccine, and then you give some people a control or a placebo, not the vaccine. And then they go into the world, and then you see which ones develop disease. And after you have, say, 150 people developing disease, then you say who was in the vaccine group and who was in the control group. And then you can express that as efficacy. The reduction in disease in the vaccine versus the control is basically the efficacy. So when we say 95%, we have a 95% reduction in disease in the vaccine group compared with the control group. And that's very high. That's a really good number. This virus is not mutating very quickly. We've been able to track it over the past year. And compared to, say, influenza virus, it really is not undergoing substantial change. Then there's no evidence for any other coronavirus that mutation to avoid a vaccine would happen. So I suspect that is not going to happen with this coronavirus. There's one strain, as far as we know, and I am quite sure that the vaccine that we make against that strain will be useful for many years to come.
Dr. Yang, how shall we see the different kinds of vaccines already in third-stage trial available in the world? Earlier you mentioned quite a number of them, including that of China. How should we compare the effectiveness?
The main type of vaccine in the current market is about the innovative vaccine and also the adenovirus vector vaccine, and as well as mRNA vaccine. mRNA vaccine is the most advanced. So this is a very new methodology and technical road. However, they require a very low temperature to keep it. But the advantage of this vaccine is when they really react that in your body, they can have the immunity for quite a long time. And the first one, that is the traditional method to making the vaccine. And that the methodology is very mature, and we have a very successful in the past. And the method is also, very productive. But the disadvantage of that is that the immunity period is quite short.
Right.
So basically, you need to have multiple immunization process. So you need to do multiple vaccines. Relatively, the adeno right now in China, that's traditional, and also that's the method the AstraZeneca and Oxford, they are taking.
Dr. Shen, we understand in the U.S. The authority regarding the issue of COVID-19 have already announced in some press report suggesting that every American will be able to have access to a vaccine in terms of the production capacity by the middle of next year, 2021. Now, how true is that statement from the availability of manufacturing to the vaccination of every citizen? How long a process are we seeing?
So for a vaccine, it's not just the efficacy, it's not just the safety, it's also related to the transportation, manufacture, and also the price. So back to your question, and as Dr. Yang just mentioned, and for the mRNA vaccines, those kind of new vaccines, they do require the cold chain transportation. So it's really, and back to your capacity, back to the manufacturer, we really need to keep in mind, actually those kind of big pharma, they start their manufacture back in August, back in July, they already did that. So in terms of the Moderna, so they by end of the December, they're going to have 20 million, and if you're talking about the BioNTech and the Pfizer, they are going to have 50 million. So those kind of vaccine ready. And if you back to those kind of other vendor like J&J, like AZ, and we really can, and the U.S. government already purchased sufficient dose to cover all the population. And if everything goes smoothly, everything goes as planned, and by next year, specifically we're talking about next April, we are going to complete the vaccination for the whole population in the States. So that's the plan.
Dr. Racaniano, we understand that during the trial, even third stage trial, the efficacy and safety number might vary very differently when it's becoming a massive vaccination of a huge population. Sometimes the number is not logically related in different cases. So how should we understand the danger there once a third stage trial, numbers not yet known to the experts and yet already going into massive population, even though we are calling them first responders, but they're already massive if you think about 20 or 30 million.
Yeah, well, the good thing is that if we start at 95%, it's a good place to start. And if it goes down, we have a lot of room. The cutoff is about 50%. Anything below 50% efficacy, you don't really want to use that.
No.
So we have a lot of room between 95 and 50%. And so I think that we'll be in a good position, even if the efficacy does go down, as many people are inoculated.
And the other thing, of course, is about how the plan will work. Now, Dr. Racaniano, we didn't hear much as to what exactly is the plan, because you also have a transition of power from one administration to another. So how do you see from a medical perspective the plan should be, the process?
Well, the good news is we're going to have a new administration in January who's going to have a plan to deal with this pandemic. And that's good news, because so far we have not had a plan. And so the next administration is already working on vaccine distribution plans. Of course, many of these companies have huge distribution networks for their drugs and so forth, like Pfizer, AstraZeneca. So they're using that. Moderna is a small company, but they're partnering with NIH to get that going. And it's a really hard thing to do, to make so many doses and distribute them everywhere. That is almost as much of a challenge as making the vaccine. But from what I can see, and this does not get a lot of publicity, this distribution and so forth, who's going to be able to inoculate, I think it's being worked on very carefully behind the scenes, and I'm very happy that we'll have an administration in place that really wants to take care of it.
Dr. Shen, the side effect that has not been widely reported, and yet it does exist, shall we say, to all the vaccines that are available right now. So about the side effect from a scientific perspective, how much is being tolerated, and how much should manufacturers, companies, pharmaceutical companies, publicize before the public have access to the vaccines?
Yeah, so actually the answer is very straight. And for the FDA, so for Moderna and for BioNTech, they are going to have those kind of FDA review. And for Pfizer's vaccine, they are going to happen December 8 and December 9 and December 10. They are going to have 3-day review days, and they are going to review hundreds of those kind of papers, line by line, and which includes those kind of side effects. And also, we really need to keep in mind for the phase 3, we have gold standard, which is double blind, and we have the control, we have the dose, we also have the placebo control.
Yeah.
So personally, I'm very confident about the data, and if FDA approved the emergency use, and this vaccine should be safe, and also should have the efficacy we already saw. And the same story to BioNTech's those vaccine. They are going to have the review on December 17. But this is just emergency use authorization, safety, and efficacy review. But in the States, the CDC, FDA, they already have a system. Actually, this is a mature system, which they call a tracking system. So every people, they got a vaccinate, the COVID vaccines, just like the flu vaccine. So we need a real ID, and we need to register, and they are going to follow you. And they also have the report system. Report system is if there's death, so you must report this kind of issue within 1 business day. And if you have other issue as a side effect, so it depends on how serious the disease is. So they have you must complete those kind of safety report within one business day to 3 business days.
On the one hand, China is pretty much getting the COVID-19 under control. You only see sporadic cases, and most of them are imported related cases. On the other hand, China does have the vaccines already available, even though the numbers and the data, we still do not know about the 3rd stage trial, but I guess it's similar for everybody else. So how do you see countries like China, South Korea, New Zealand, for example, they should operate their vaccination plan?
The reason you have the virus under control is that you have very strict quarantine, in particular for travelers, and you don't want to have that forever. So you have to vaccinate your population. If you would like to have people come to the country and not have to stay 2 weeks in a hotel before doing their business, you have to vaccinate, because this virus is with us to stay forever. It's not going away. We're going to have to vaccinate everyone on the planet, and the virus will continue to circulate in the small numbers of people who are not vaccinated. So I would say yes, you still have to vaccinate everyone, despite having very low numbers of cases.
Dr. Shen.
Clearly, and the virus got contained is mainly because very strict those kind of measure, and we really need to reopen the economics and so also the business. So and the most famous saying is, no one will be safe until everybody is safe. So that's really applied to this scenario. I think a vaccine is the only way we can provide. It's the solution for this pandemic. It's also the way to end this pandemic. So personally, I think everybody need to get vaccinated by the COVID-19 vaccine. And the good news is we do have the capacity, like AZ's virus, so they are going to manufacture 3 billion doses of those kind of vaccine next year.
Yeah, COVAX, of course, is a platform that so well known these days about how to correlate all the different stakeholders and make sure more of the population in the world will be having access to the vaccine. However, here comes the issue. China is part of it. Other countries could be part of it. U.S. is not part of it, even though there are pharmaceutical companies in the U.S. that are backbones in vaccine research and production. So that puts an interesting question. What will be the fate of the rest of the world in terms of their access to vaccines, to the best vaccines, to the most efficient vaccines? Dr. Racanello.
Well, as I said before, we have a new administration who's going to care about the rest of the world, and so I'm sure it's going to be a priority. for the new administration to help do that. Not every country, as you know, can make their own vaccines, so they're dependent on others. And this is a time for the nations that are making vaccines to give vaccines to those who can't make them. And I'm pretty confident. I am confident that we can do that, and especially in the U.S., and I'm sure China as well. We can be leaders, and we can make enough vaccine not only to cover our own population, but many others as well.
Thank you so much for the three of you. Thank you for your expertise and certainly helping us to understand some of the basic knowledge to you, and yet certainly fascinating information to the rest of us. Thank you so much, Vincent Recaniello, Yang Hongjun, Shen Dong. Thank you.